I had always believed that family should come first. That was the guiding principle of my life, or at least the one I like to tell myself. Over the years, I'd given everything for my children, sacrificed, compromised, worked harder than anyone could imagine. So when I decided to buy a house for my daughter Olivia, it felt like a simple act of love. After all, she was starting a new chapter in her life, moving away from home to begin her career, and I wanted to give her the stability I had never been able to offer. Olivia had always been my pride. She was brilliant, independent, kind-hearted, a far cry from the rebellious teenager she had once been. I had raised her alone after her father left, and though it wasn't always easy, she had blossomed into someone I admired. She had worked hard to get to where she was earning a scholarship to college, and then securing a good job right out of school. Her life was beginning to take shape in a way I had only dreamed of for myself, and I wanted to help her. It wasn't the grandest of houses, nothing too extravagant, just a small but cozy place in a quiet neighborhood. Perfect for someone starting out. I didn't consult anyone, especially not my daughter-in-law, Emily. Olivia was my daughter, and I was more than happy to help her. I thought it was a simple gesture, an expression of love and support. After all, I had always been the one to make sacrifices for my children. What was wrong with providing a bit of comfort to my daughter as she began her new journey? At first, I didn't anticipate the backlash. Not from Emily. It was subtle at first, like a storm on the horizon that I couldn't quite make out. Little comments here and there. "Oh, that's nice," she'd say, when I mentioned the house, but I could hear the edge in her voice, the tension in her words. Still, I brushed it off. Surely, I thought it was nothing to be concerned about. But when Olivia went to visit the house, excited to take the first steps in her new life, that's when I saw it clearly for the first time. The subtle, almost imperceptible change in Emily's demeanor. She was quiet, too quiet during dinner that evening. Olivia had been sharing her excitement about the move, the new house, the possibilities ahead. But Emily barely responded, her lips tight, her eyes cold. It wasn't like her. She was always the life of the party, always ready with a joke or a comment to liven the room. But tonight something was different. The smile she gave Olivia felt strained, almost forced. I felt the shift in the room, like the air had thickened, and I couldn't shake the unease gnawing at me. I looked over at Frank, my husband. He hadn't noticed anything. He was too wrapped up in his own thoughts, too proud of our daughter's accomplishments. But I wasn't blind. I could feel the tension radiating off Emily, and I couldn't ignore it. I had always known that Emily was complicated. She had a way of hiding her true feelings, of playing the role of the perfect daughter-in-law, but there were moments when I saw glimpses of something else. She was the type who didn't like to show vulnerability, someone who kept her emotions tightly controlled. That was fine. I had learned to respect that over the years, but this time, there was something more. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to draw attention to the quiet storm brewing at the table, and I hoped it would pass. But it didn't. After dinner, as Olivia and Frank went to the living room to look over some documents for her move, Emily cornered me in the kitchen. Her tone was calm, almost too calm, but there was an underlying current of anger beneath it. She closed the door behind her, and I knew instantly that something was about to happen. I had never seen her so controlled, so distant. "Grace," she said, her voice measured. "Can we talk for a minute?" I set the dish towel down and faced her, trying to gauge the situation. I had been a mother for long enough to know when a confrontation was coming. I braced myself, but my heart was still unprepared for the words she was about to speak. "You know, I don't think you realize how much this affects all of us," she continued, her voice tight. "Buying Olivia a house. Really, don't you think that's a little much? What about me? What about us?" I blinked in confusion, trying to process what she was saying. "What do you mean I'm just helping her? She's starting a new life." She crossed her arms over her chest, a defensive posture that I'd seen too many times before. And what about me? What about our financial struggles? Our future? Don't you think you should have asked us first instead of just going ahead and making that decision? Her words hit me like a slap to the face. The anger, the frustration in her voice, it was unmistakable. I hadn't seen this coming. Emily had always been the one who was supportive, who had never once questioned my role in the family. But now this was something entirely different. Emily, I'm sorry if you feel that way, but this wasn't about you, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I've helped you and Matt before, but this is for Olivia. She's my daughter. Her eyes narrowed and the tension in the air was palpable. I knew then that this wasn't just about money or houses. It was about something deeper. Something that I wasn't seeing or maybe didn't want to see. I get it, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Olivia's your little princess and she can do no wrong. But don't think for a second that I'm blind to the way you treat her. It's like I'm invisible in this family. Her words stung, but I refused to let her see that. I had spent years building a life for my family, making sacrifices, and giving everything I could to make sure they were happy. Yet here she was, accusing me of favoring my own daughter. I don't treat you that way, I replied, my voice colder now. You know how much I've done for you and Matt. I've always supported you. But this is different. Olivia is starting a new chapter and I wanted to help her. Help her, Emily shot back. Or make up for all the things you didn't do for me. Is that it? Because that's how it feels. You think just throwing money around will fix everything, but it won't. It never does. I stood there stunned, struggling to find the right words. What was this? Why was she so angry? Was it just about the house? Or was there something deeper that I hadn't yet uncovered? The answers were elusive, slipping just out of reach. For a moment, I considered saying something to placate her, to smooth things over. But I couldn't. Not this time. The tension between us was too thick, the words too sharp. I'm sorry you feel that way. I finally said, my voice steady but firm. But this is what I'm doing. And it's for Olivia. I don't expect you to understand, but that's the truth. I turned to walk away, but she stopped me. I'm not done, Grace, she said, her voice a low warning. This isn't over. I didn't turn back. I couldn't. I was too shaken, too stunned by what had just happened. As I walked out of the kitchen, I could feel her eyes on my back. The weight of her gaze, full of resentment and anger, stayed with me long after I had returned to the living room. I tried to push the conversation out of my mind, but it wouldn't go. That night, as I lay in bed beside Frank, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced, and the words Emily had said echoed through my thoughts louder with each passing hour. What had happened to the woman I had once called family? Where had this anger come from? I had always known that Emily was complicated. But this felt like something more. And I had a sinking feeling that I hadn't even begun to scratch the surface of what was truly going on beneath her calm, collected exterior. But I would soon learn. And when I did, it would change everything. I spent the next few days walking through our house with a sense of unease, the memory of Emily's confrontation still fresh in my mind. Each time I passed her, I felt the tension thick and suffocating, like an invisible barrier that neither of us dared to cross. I couldn't quite understand what had happened. There had to be more to it than just the house. But what was it? I tried to talk to Frank about it, hoping he would offer some perspective, but his response was typical. Grace, you know, Emily. She just gets worked up over things sometimes. It's nothing to worry about. That was Frank, always the optimist, always believing the best in people. It was one of the things I loved most about him. But this time, I wasn't so sure. Something felt off, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a simple misunderstanding. I made the decision to give Emily space, hoping the anger would fade with time. I continued to support Olivia, who was thrilled about her new home, her excitement infectious. I watched her pack up her things, her joy so palpable that it almost made me forget about the growing divide between me and Emily. Almost. But Emily didn't let things slide. It was as if the anger festered, only growing deeper as the days passed. Every time I saw her, she seemed more withdrawn, her eyes colder. I'd try to engage in small talk, but she'd respond in short, clipped sentences as if she were speaking to a stranger, not her mother-in-law. It was like walking on eggshells, unsure when the next fracture would appear. And then, one afternoon it happened. I was in the living room going through a box of old family photos when I heard the sound of the door opening. Emily walked in, her expression set, her eyes dark with something unreadable. I knew this was coming. I could feel it in my bones. "Grace," she said, her voice low, measured. "We need to talk." I stood up, bracing myself for another confrontation. But this time, there was something different about the way she spoke, less defensive, more assertive. She was no longer hiding behind a wall of sarcasm and anger. She was done playing games. "All right," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though I could feel my heart rate quicken. "What's going on, Emily? You've been avoiding me for days." She didn't speak immediately, instead, walking to the window, looking out at the quiet street. The silence between us stretched thick and heavy until she finally turned to face me. "I'm tired of pretending," she said, her voice flat. "Tired of pretending everything is okay when it's not. You've been giving Olivia everything, your time, your attention, your money, and I get nothing. Do you even realize what that feels like?" I blinked, stunned. It wasn't the outburst I expected, but it hit me with more force than I could have anticipated. Her words stung, but they also made me pause. Was this really about me giving Olivia a house? Or was it about something deeper? "I've always tried to help you and Matt when you needed it," I said, trying to keep the conversation calm, even though my insides were churning. "But this is different. Olivia is my daughter. I wanted to help her start her life, just like I've always tried to help you." Emily shook her head, but there was no malice in the gesture, only resignation. "That's the problem, Grace. You've always helped Olivia. But when was the last time you helped me? When was the last time you saw me as your daughter too? You've been so focused on Olivia, on giving her everything, that you forgot about me. I'm here too." I felt the weight of her words, and a cold knot settled in my stomach. Was this really how she felt? Had I been so caught up in my desire to help Olivia that I had neglected the very person who had become a part of my family? "I didn't mean to make you feel left out." "Emily," I said softly, my voice shaky with the realization that maybe I had been blind to her pain. "But you've never asked for anything. You've always been independent, self-sufficient. You never seemed to need my help." She let out a dry laugh, her eyes hard. "You never asked me if I needed it. You just assumed that because I didn't complain, everything was fine. But it wasn't. It isn't. And now it's too late." Her words cut deeper than I expected. The realization settled into me like a lead weight. I had been so focused on my daughter, on making sure she had everything she needed, that I hadn't even noticed how Emily had been slipping further and further away. How had I missed it? I wanted to respond, to apologize, to make things right. But something held me back. It was as if Emily wasn't just angry at me for the house. It was something else, something buried deep within her that had festered over the years. "I don't know what you want me to say," I said finally, my voice barely a whisper. "I can't change the past, Emily. I can't go back and undo everything. But I'm here now. If you need something from me, I'll listen. I'll try to be better." I just— "Stop," she interrupted, her voice rising. "Don't give me your pity. It's not about that. It's about the fact that you've been playing favorites all these years, and I've had enough. I'm not going to sit in the background while you shower Olivia with everything she wants and I get nothing. It's not fair, Grace. It's not fair." I opened my mouth to argue, but I couldn't find the words. The truth was, I had been giving Olivia everything because I believed she deserved it, because I had seen her struggle and wanted to make her life easier. But did Emily deserve less? Had I been unfair? The questions buzzed in my mind, each one more insistent than the last. Emily took a deep breath as if calming herself before continuing. I don't want to fight with you, Grace. But I can't just stand by and pretend like this is all fine. It's not. And I need you to understand that. I knotted my throat tight, my heart heavy. I do understand, Emily. I never knew you felt this way. I didn't see it. She looked at me, her eyes softening for a moment, but then the guard went back up. Well, now you do. She turned to leave, but paused at the door. I just needed you to know. And I needed you to know that I'm not going to just sit back and let you do whatever you want anymore. Things have to change. With that, she was gone, leaving me standing in the middle of the room, unsure of how to process everything she had said. It felt like a door had been slammed in my face, but I didn't know how to open it again. This wasn't just about the house anymore. This was about something deeper, something that had been growing for years, and I had a sinking feeling that this was just the beginning. I sat there, the weight of Emily's words sinking in. It was like a fog had settled over everything, leaving me disoriented and unsure of what to do next. The house that I had thought would be a gift, an expression of love for my daughter, was now at the center of an unraveling storm. But it wasn't just about the house anymore. Emily's accusations had exposed a crack in our family's foundation, one I hadn't seen coming, nor did I know how to mend. I kept thinking about her last words, how she said things had to change. The question lingered in the back of my mind, change into what I didn't know. What could I do now? How could I fix this? Or was it even possible to fix? Days passed in a blur. I tried to reach out to Emily, sending her texts, making calls, but each time she either ignored me or responded with short, distant replies. The silence between us grew, and the gap between me and my daughter-in-law widened further. It was as if we had both retreated into separate worlds, locked in our own pain and resentment. The strangest thing was that I didn't know how to deal with this kind of conflict. In my life, I had always prided myself on being the peacemaker, the one who could smooth over tensions and bring people together. But with Emily, it felt different. It felt like there was no way back. She had closed off her heart, and I couldn't figure out how to unlock it. Olivia, on the other hand, seemed oblivious to the growing rift. She was still thrilled about her new house, sending me pictures of paint samples, furniture ideas, and plans for a small housewarming party. I couldn't bring myself to tell her the full truth about what had happened with Emily. She was already under enough stress with the move, and I didn't want to burden her with it. But the guilt gnawed at me. Was I betraying my own family by not telling her the reality of what was going on with her mother-in-law? I knew I had to confront Emily at some point. There was no avoiding it, but every time I tried to work up the courage, I found myself hesitating. What could I say to her? How could I fix this? I didn't want to lose her, not after all these years of trying to build a relationship with her. But the truth was, I didn't know if I could repair the damage that had been done. There were things between us that went beyond a house or financial decisions. There were years of unspoken emotions, things that had built up over time, quietly festering in the background. The next time I saw Emily was in the grocery store. It wasn't planned. I had simply been shopping for some essentials when I turned down an aisle and saw her there standing near the produce section. She was by herself, her cart half full, and she looked just as tense as I felt. I froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. I could walk away, pretend I didn't see her, or I could face the situation head-on. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever might come next, and walked toward her. She saw me approach, and for a moment there was a flicker of recognition in her eyes, a brief, almost imperceptible softening of her features. But it didn't last. The walls went back up, and her expression turned guarded. "Hi, Emily," I said softly, my voice cautious. She nodded but didn't offer much else. The silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. I could feel the tension, the awkwardness, but I wasn't going to back down this time. I needed to know where we stood. I think we need to talk, I said, trying to keep my tone even. Her gaze flickered to me, her lips pressed together in a thin line. About what, she asked, her voice sharp. About us. About what's been happening between us lately. I know things have been tense and I don't want to keep avoiding it, I said, my heart pounding in my chest. She let out a small, almost bitter laugh. Oh, really? Now you want to talk? After everything. I winced, the sting of her words cutting deep. But I couldn't back down now. I had to keep going. Yes, I do. I don't want things to be like this, Emily. I want to understand what's really going on, I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the emotions that were swirling inside me. She stared at me for a long moment, her eyes cold, calculating. And then, without warning, she sighed as if giving up on pretending. Fine, she said. Let's talk. We moved to a quieter corner of the store away from the crowds, the noise, and the distractions. Emily crossed her arms over her chest, and I couldn't help but notice how defensive she looked, like she was preparing for an argument. Grace. She began, her voice low but edged with frustration. You don't get it, do you? You think buying Olivia a house is this grand gesture, this act of love. But all it did was expose everything that's wrong with our relationship, with our whole family dynamic. I opened my mouth to respond, but she held up her hand, silencing me. Don't, she said, her voice hard. You've always treated Olivia like she's the golden child. You dote on her, give her everything she wants, and what about me? What about Matt and me? Do you think I don't see it? Do you think I don't notice how much you've favored Olivia over the years? Her words hit like a punch to the gut. It wasn't the first time she'd hinted at feeling neglected, but hearing it out in the open like this in such raw terms made it feel like a knife had been twisted into an old wound. Emily, I've never meant to make you feel that way, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You know I love you, and I've always tried to support you. She shook her head, the frustration in her eyes building. Support me. Support me, Grace. You've supported me financially, yes. But emotionally, I've been on my own. I've been dealing with things I never told you about. And all the while, I watched you give Olivia everything she wanted, everything she needed, and it never occurred to you that maybe I needed something too. I felt my chest tighten. The anger in her voice was no longer just anger. It was years of built-up resentment, of feeling unseen, of being overshadowed by Olivia's presence. I had never realized how deeply Emily had been hurt by this. I didn't know, I said softly. I didn't know you felt that way. Emily met my eyes, her face softening for just a moment before the walls came back up. Well, now you do. And don't pretend like this house thing was some innocent gesture. You didn't buy that house for Olivia, Grace. You bought it because you're trying to make up for all the years of neglect. I recoiled slightly at her words, her accusations landing like blows, but I didn't argue. She was right in some ways. I had been so focused on providing for Olivia that I had overlooked the growing distance between myself and Emily. And now I had no idea how to bridge that gap. Emily, I began, but she interrupted me again. No, she said firmly, her eyes hardening. This is not just about a house. It's about everything, Grace. It's about how you've treated me all these years and how I've never been able to measure up. I didn't know how to respond to that. I wanted to apologize, to fix things, but I didn't know if it was too late. Maybe I failed you, I said quietly, but I want to try to do better. I just don't know how. She studied me for a moment, her expression unreadable. Well, maybe it's too late for that, she said, her voice quieter now, almost resigned. But at least you finally see the truth. It was supposed to be a simple dinner. Frank had invited Emily and Matt over, and I had gone all out with the cooking. Something light but comforting: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, fresh vegetables. A meal that would bring the family together, a meal that might help ease the tension I had been feeling for weeks. But the truth was, I was on edge. The air between Emily and me had become thick with unresolved issues, and even though Frank was oblivious, I could sense it. Every time I glanced at Emily across the table, I felt this undercurrent of hostility, the kind that had settled between us like an invisible wall. We were both pretending, but I could feel the cracks widening with every passing second. Olivia, for once, seemed blissfully unaware of the brewing storm. She was excited, sharing stories about her new job, the house, the plans she had for her future. But her enthusiasm only seemed to amplify the tension in the room. It was as if her happiness highlighted everything that Emily and I had lost. She was so caught up in her own world, in her own achievements, that she didn't see what was happening to the rest of us. As the meal continued, I tried my best to keep the conversation light. Frank was in his element, cracking jokes and laughing at Olivia's stories, completely oblivious to the shifting dynamics around him. But Emily was different. She barely spoke. Her eyes flicked to Olivia every now and then, but for the most part she was silent, her focus on her plate, her posture stiff and guarded. I tried to engage her a few times. "So Emily, how's work going? Have you and Matt planned that weekend getaway you've been talking about?" She gave me a tight smile, but her voice was flat when she responded, "Yeah, we're working on it. It's just been a busy time." There it was again. That distance, that coldness. I kept trying. "Olivia's been really excited about the house. She's planning to paint the walls in the living room. What do you think about it, Emily?" For a brief moment she looked up, meeting my eyes, but the smile she gave me was more like a sneer than anything genuine. "I'm sure it's nice," she said, her tone clipped, and then she dropped her fork with a loud clink, the sound cutting through the silence like a crack of thunder. "Grace, we need to talk," she said, her voice sharp. I froze. I had been waiting for this moment, but when it actually arrived, I wasn't ready. Not at all. Frank looked up, confused, his brow furrowing. "What's going on?" I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, the blood pounding in my ears. This wasn't how I wanted things to go. Not in front of Olivia. Not during what was supposed to be a peaceful family dinner. But Emily wasn't giving me a choice. "Grace and I need to have a conversation." Emily repeated, her eyes never leaving mine. "Alone." Frank, still clueless, blinked and glanced from me to Emily. "What's this about?" "It's fine, Frank," I said quickly, my voice a little too high-pitched. "I'll handle it." He didn't look convinced, but he didn't press. He returned to his conversation with Olivia, his attention back on the light-hearted banter. But Emily and I both knew that this dinner had already taken a turn. There was no going back. Once the room was quiet again, Emily stood up, motioning for me to follow her. Without a word, I got up from the table and walked into the next room, my stomach a bundle of nerves. I knew this was coming, but now that it was happening, I had no idea what to expect. We stood in the living room, the atmosphere thick with the weight of what was about to unfold. I could feel the familiar discomfort creeping over me like a knot tightening in my chest. Emily crossed her arms over her chest, her face pale but tight with anger. "What is this about, Emily?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, even though I could feel the tension building inside me. "Why are you doing this now, in front of everyone?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a deep breath, as if gathering her thoughts. But when she finally spoke, her voice was low, controlled, but every word laced with frustration. "Do you know how it feels?" "Grace?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. "Do you know how it feels to be ignored, to feel like you're invisible? To watch you give everything to Olivia, to dote on her, like she's the only one who matters?" I swallowed hard. This wasn't just about the house anymore. This was about years of accumulated resentment, of feeling overlooked and unimportant. "Emily," I began softly, but she cut me off. "No, you don't get to play the victim here," she said, her voice rising, no longer controlled. "I've been quiet for so long, pretending everything was fine. but it's not. It hasn't been for a long time. You've always treated Olivia like she's the golden child, like she's your priority. And I've had enough. I'm tired of it. I flinched at her words, the sting of her anger settling deep inside me. She was right. I had been focused on Olivia for so long, so intent on giving her the stability I never had, that I had failed to see the slow erosion of my relationship with Emily. I hadn't noticed how she had withdrawn, how her feelings of neglect had grown until they exploded into this moment. I didn't mean to make you feel that way, I said, my voice breaking slightly. I never intended to hurt you, Emily, but you have to understand I wanted to help Olivia. I didn't think it was going to cause this kind of tension. She shook her head, her expression hard. You don't get it, do you? It's not just the house, Grace. It's everything. Every time I look at you, I see someone who only cares about Olivia. You act like she's the only one who matters, like she's the only one worth your time. And I'm left here watching invisible while you throw all your energy into her. My heart sank. Her words were like daggers piercing through everything I thought I knew about our family. It was painful to hear, but I couldn't deny the truth in them. I had been so blinded by my desire to help Olivia to make up for the things I had never been able to give her that I had overlooked Emily entirely. I'm sorry, I whispered, feeling the weight of her words settle over me. I never meant for you to feel invisible. You're not invisible to me, but I see now how I've hurt you. Emily didn't say anything. She just stood there, arms crossed, her eyes narrowed. I could feel the distance between us, the unspoken words hanging in the air, thick and suffocating. For a long moment, neither of us moved. I wanted to reach out to touch her, to apologize properly, but the gap between us seemed insurmountable. The damage had been done, and I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know if it could be fixed. I can't do this anymore, Grace. Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't keep pretending everything's fine. It's not. And I don't know if it ever will be. She turned to leave, and I stood frozen in place, watching her walk away. The days following our heated exchange were charged with a kind of energy that I wasn't sure how to handle. I had thought that the worst of it was over, that after Emily's confession we could begin to heal. But I quickly realized that healing was never as simple as a single conversation. Emily had been harboring resentment for years, and the words she had finally spoken weren't just about the house or the money, it was everything. It was about the way she had been overlooked, the way she had felt invisible in this family, always standing in the shadows while I focused my attention on Olivia. When I thought back to all the times I had been with Emily, I began to see how much I had missed. She was so good at hiding her emotions, so skilled at pretending that everything was fine, that I had never questioned her silence. But now it felt like everything had cracked open, and the floodgates were spilling over. It wasn't just the house. It was the years of emotional neglect, the years of me putting my own daughter first, not realizing that Emily, my daughter-in-law, was a part of this family too. That she needed me just as Olivia did, and I had failed to see it. I found myself replaying the argument in my head over and over, trying to figure out where things had gone wrong. I thought I had been doing the right thing. I thought I had been showing Olivia love, providing for her in ways I never could, and giving her the security that I had always wished I could offer. But I hadn't realized that in doing so, I had built a wall between myself and Emily, a wall of silence, a wall of neglect, and one that I wasn't sure how to tear down. But as much as Emily's anger was justified, I couldn't help but feel a pang of bitterness. How could she have kept this inside for so long? How could she have let me go on, never once asking for help? Never once showing me how much she was hurting? I wanted to understand, to be the one she turned to, but how could I? When she had always kept her pain to herself, I thought of the countless family dinners, the quiet moments when I would offer support, when I would try to encourage Emily and she would smile but never fully engage. I thought of all the times I asked her how she was, and she would say, "Fine." her voice tight, her expression guarded. I had no idea that the fine was a lie. I had no idea that the smile she gave me was just a mask she wore to keep me from seeing how much she was falling apart inside. And in those quiet moments when she would retreat into herself, I would turn to Olivia for comfort. I was just as guilty as Emily had accused me of being focused solely on Olivia, always turning toward her in search of reassurance that I was doing the right thing as a mother. But I was blind to Emily's struggles, blind to the way she felt invisible in her own marriage, in her own family. Blind to the fact that the resentment she carried wasn't just about me favoring Olivia. It was about Emily feeling like she was never good enough, never enough to be seen. The argument was just the beginning of the emotional unraveling between us. As much as I wanted to reach out to apologize to make everything right, I realized that the damage was deeper than I had ever imagined. Emily's resentment wasn't just about the house. It was about years of being overlooked. And I was terrified that no amount of apologies would ever be enough to fix what had been broken. It was only after the argument that I began to understand the full extent of the damage I had done. But it wasn't until a few days later when I happened to stumble upon something that would change everything that I truly understood the depths of Emily's pain. I had been going through some papers in the living room when I found something unusual, an envelope that had been tucked under a pile of magazines. I didn't know why, but something compelled me to open it. Inside, I found a letter. It wasn't addressed to anyone. It wasn't a formal letter, but rather a personal note written by Emily herself. I wasn't sure why, but I couldn't resist reading it. I knew I was crossing a line. I knew this wasn't something I was meant to see. But as I read the words on the page, I felt like I was uncovering a hidden truth, one that Emily had kept buried deep inside for so long. The words were raw, vulnerable, and filled with the kind of emotional weight that I had never realized she carried. Every day feels like a battle, the letter began. I'm exhausted. I can't keep pretending everything's fine. I've tried to be strong to make everyone happy, but it's killing me. I'm afraid of what will happen if I keep this up. I'm afraid of becoming like my mother, someone who can't be loved because she doesn't know how to love herself. I don't want to be that woman. But it feels like that's all I'm ever going to be. I don't think I can keep living like this. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. These words, this pain had been hidden from me for so long. Emily had been carrying this burden and I hadn't even noticed. I had been so wrapped up in my own feelings of guilt, so caught up in trying to make Olivia's life better, that I hadn't seen the quiet despair that Emily had been living with. Her words hit harder than I ever imagined. She wasn't just angry at me for the house. She wasn't just hurt by my neglect. She was haunted by her past, by the emotional neglect she had faced from her mother. And she was terrified that she was repeating the same cycle, loving and giving, without ever feeling like she was truly enough. The letter was a cry for help, a cry that I had ignored for years. I didn't know how to process it. How could I have missed it all? How could I have been so blind to the suffering right in front of me? I barely had time to process what I had read before I heard the door open. Emily had returned from her walk, and when she saw me sitting there with the letter in my hands, I knew that I had crossed a line. She had never meant for me to see this. But now that I had, I didn't know how to address it. I wasn't ready for you to know. Emily said, her voice soft, her face flushed with embarrassment. I didn't want you to see that. I didn't know what to say. The guilt overwhelmed me, but it wasn't just guilt for reading her private thoughts. It was guilt for not seeing the signs sooner, for not being the support she had needed. I'm sorry, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. I didn't know. I had no idea how much you were carrying. Emily didn't respond right away. She just stood there looking at me, her face conflicted. The pain she had written about was now out in the open, and I wasn't sure how to deal with it. I've been carrying this for so long, Grace, she said quietly. I didn't want anyone to know how much I was hurting. I didn't want you to see me like this. I'm here, Emily, I said, finally standing up and walking over to her. You don't have to carry it alone. You don't have to hide from me anymore. But even as I spoke the words, I knew it wouldn't be that easy. Healing wouldn't be quick. It wouldn't be simple. But for the first time, we had a chance to start. The silence between Emily and me was suffocating. After our intense conversation about her pain, I had hoped things would improve. But in reality, nothing had changed. The emotional divide between us was still there, quietly festering beneath the surface. I was struggling to find a way to bridge the gap, but the truth was, I didn't know how. Each time I thought we were making progress, I found myself back where I started, stuck in a cycle of guilt, confusion, and distance. The worst part was that it wasn't just about the house anymore. It wasn't just about me trying to make Olivia's life better by buying her a home. No, it was about the years of neglect, of Emily feeling invisible in her own family. I had been so wrapped up in Olivia's needs that I hadn't noticed how Emily had been silently suffering. She had been carrying so much anger, frustration, and resentment, and I had failed to see it. I had been so consumed with my desire to fix things with Olivia that I had overlooked the person who was closest to me. Emily had been quietly fighting for my attention, for my love, for my approval, but I had never seen it. I had never recognized that she too was struggling. She had been quietly enduring the weight of feeling second best. And the worst part was that she never asked for anything. She had always been the strong one, the one who didn't need help. But now I realized that she did need me, and I had missed that. I had missed her pain. I began to see how much the imbalance in our family dynamic had affected her. Olivia, of course, had always been my priority, my daughter, my responsibility. But Emily was a part of this family too. She was my daughter-in-law, and I had never fully acknowledged her needs. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that Emily's pain wasn't just about what I had done for Olivia. It was about the years of emotional neglect. The years of her feeling like she was never good enough, never worthy of the attention that I had so freely given to Olivia. I was caught in a tug-of-war, torn between my love for Olivia and my growing understanding of Emily's hurt. Each time I turned to one, the other seemed to retreat further into themselves. I didn't know how to balance these two relationships. I didn't know how to make things right for both of them. Every attempt to show Emily that I cared seemed to fall flat. She was distant, cold, and I couldn't figure out how to break through. I had become the very thing I never wanted to be, the person who couldn't see the needs of the people closest to me. It wasn't just about love either. Emily was also fighting for something else: respect. She had been silently demanding respect from me, from Matt, from everyone around her. And I hadn't seen it. I had been so focused on the mistakes I had made with Olivia, on trying to correct the imbalance in her life, that I had forgotten about Emily's silent battle for acknowledgement. Every time I reached out to her, I was met with a resistance that I couldn't explain. It wasn't anger, but it wasn't warmth either. It was as if Emily was holding back, waiting for me to understand what she needed before she could let me in again. It became clear to me that I wasn't the only one struggling with this power dynamic. Matt, Emily's husband, could sense the tension between us as well. I could see it in his eyes, the way he looked at Emily with concern, but also with helplessness. He didn't know how to fix things either. Emily had retreated into herself, and Matt didn't know how to pull her back. It wasn't that he wasn't trying, it was that Emily wasn't letting anyone in, and I couldn't help but feel like I was failing her in a way that was beyond my control. The more I reached out to Emily, the more she seemed to pull away. Every attempt to bridge the gap between us seemed to make the distance grow wider. It wasn't because she didn't care, it was because she had been hurt too many times. She was protecting herself, shielding herself from further disappointment. I could see that, but it didn't make it any easier. And then there was Olivia. My attempts to make things right with Emily had caused an unexpected shift in my relationship with Olivia. As much as I loved my daughter, I couldn't deny that there was a growing resentment in her eyes. Every time I spoke about Emily, every time I tried to explain the rift between us, I saw the hurt in Olivia's face. She didn't understand why I wasn't giving her the attention she thought she deserved. She had always been my priority, my responsibility, and now she was feeling sidelined by my efforts to fix things with Emily. She felt like I was abandoning her, even though I was only trying to make things right. I couldn't win. No matter what I did, it felt like I was failing both Emily and Olivia. Every action I took seemed to hurt one of them, and as I watched both of them retreat into themselves, I realized that I couldn't keep trying to fix everything on my own. The burden of trying to please both of them was too heavy for me to bear alone. I had to learn to let go of the need to be the peacemaker, to let go of the need to fix everyone's problems. For the first time in a long time, I didn't know how to proceed. I couldn't fix things with Emily overnight. And I couldn't force Olivia to understand the complexities of the situation. All I could do was show up. I had to be there for both of them, not as someone trying to fix things, but as someone willing to listen, to understand, and to give them the space they needed to heal. But as I sat there feeling the weight of everything that was unsaid between Emily and me, I wondered if I had missed my chance to make things right. The days following Emily's confession were a strange quiet. I thought we'd made progress after our difficult conversation, but the silence between us grew heavier with each passing day. It wasn't the peaceful quiet that comes with understanding. It was a tense, oppressive silence that seemed to stretch out endlessly. Emily had pulled back, retreating even further into herself, and no matter how many times I tried to engage, she remained distant. The more I thought about everything Emily had revealed, the more I realized how much I had missed. She wasn't just angry at me for what I had done for Olivia. She wasn't merely upset about the house. It was years of feeling neglected, of being invisible in her own family. She had been quietly fighting for my love and attention, and I hadn't even seen it. And I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of guilt. I had tried so hard to fix Olivia's life, to make things right for her, but in doing so, I had alienated the person who had been right next to me all along. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Emily's hurt was more than just a passing feeling. It was a wound that had festered for years. But every time I reached out to her, she recoiled. I could see the walls she had built around herself, and no matter how much I tried to tear them down, she wasn't ready to let me in. But what hurt the most was that I couldn't tell if it was my fault. I had never been a perfect mother-in-law, but I had tried to be a good one. I had tried to help, to be there when they needed me, to support Emily as much as I could. But now, with everything coming to light, I was starting to question whether I had ever truly seen her. I had tried so hard to fix Olivia's world, but in doing so, I had neglected Emily's. I had failed to recognize that she too needed me, and in the process I had turned her into a shadow, someone whose needs I didn't even acknowledge. Matt too could see the strain. I could tell he was worried, though he never directly said anything. His silence spoke volumes, and I couldn't help but wonder what he was thinking. Was he silently blaming me for the rift between Emily and me, or was he just as confused and lost as I was? Despite my efforts, the emotional distance between Emily and me continued to grow. Every time I reached out, it felt like I was pushing her further away. I knew she needed space, but what she also needed was assurance. She needed to know that I saw her, that I recognized her pain. But every attempt I made to give that to her seemed to fall flat. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I was walking on eggshells, trying not to upset her, trying not to push too hard. But the truth was, it was getting harder and harder to breathe in this tension, and I couldn't tell if the silence was the calm before the storm, or if it was a sign that things were unraveling beyond repair. Then, one evening, it all came crashing down. Emily walked into the living room, her eyes distant, her expression unreadable. I knew she had been struggling with the weight of everything we had been through, but I hadn't expected her to bring it all up again. But this time she did. She was done holding it in. Grace. She began, her voice quiet but firm. We need to talk. I can't keep doing this. I felt my stomach drop. This was the moment I had been dreading, the moment I couldn't avoid any longer. I had hoped that things would eventually improve on their own, but it was clear now that wasn't going to happen. I stood up, preparing myself for whatever was about to come. I can't keep pretending, Emily continued, her voice thick with emotion. I've been trying so hard to make things work, but I don't know how much longer I can do this. I felt a lump form in my throat. I wasn't sure how to respond. The words I had been holding in for so long felt like they were finally spilling out, but I was afraid they wouldn't be enough. I know I've hurt you, Emily, I said softly. I never meant to. But I see now how much I've neglected you. I see how much you've been silently hurting, and I'm so sorry. She didn't respond immediately, just stood there, her eyes fixed on the ground. I could feel the weight of her silence, the years of unspoken resentment settling between us like a thick fog. I didn't want to be like this, Grace, she finally said, her voice shaking. I didn't want to feel so angry all the time, but I've been so hurt, and I didn't know how to deal with it. And I didn't know how to tell you. I reached out, but Emily stepped back, her eyes distant. I wanted you to see me, she said. But you couldn't. You were so focused on Olivia that I just faded into the background. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been so focused on Olivia, on fixing everything for her, that I had failed to see the woman who had been standing right beside me all along. The guilt, the shame flooded through me as I realized the depth of my mistake. I'm sorry, Emily, I whispered, my voice breaking. I never meant to make you feel invisible. I never meant to hurt you. She didn't say anything for a long while, just stood there, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. The silence between us felt suffocating, but I didn't know how to break it. I had made so many mistakes, and I didn't know how to fix them. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, Emily finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I'll try. I need time. I need space to figure out how to let go of all of this. I nodded, tears welling in my eyes. I understand. I'll give you all the time you need. But even as I spoke the words, I knew this wasn't just about giving Emily time. It was about proving to her that I could be there for her, not just when it was convenient. Not just when Olivia wasn't demanding my attention, but always. I needed to show her that I wasn't going to give up on her. And even though the road ahead seemed long and uncertain, I wasn't ready to let go. The silence between Emily and me persisted, but it wasn't the kind of silence I had grown used to. It was different now, quieter, more reflective. It was as if, in the midst of our turmoil, we were both waiting for something to shift, for the emotional weight to finally release, or for the storm to hit harder than before. I had tried to keep things moving forward. I told myself that this awkward calm was the beginning of healing, that if I just gave Emily the space she needed, everything would slowly fall into place. But I was fooling myself. The truth was, I wasn't sure if we were moving toward reconciliation or further apart. Every attempt I made to reach out felt like I was walking on fragile ground, unsure whether it would crack beneath me at any moment. It was difficult to pinpoint when exactly things had started to feel different. There were moments, small fleeting moments, when I thought I could see a shift in Emily's demeanor. A brief glance, a subtle softening in her expression. But those moments always faded before I could fully grasp them, leaving me wondering if I had imagined them. The most challenging part was not knowing how to approach her. Every time I tried, I found myself retreating into a self-imposed silence, wondering if I was pushing too hard, if I was suffocating her with my need to fix things. Emily had made it clear that she needed time, and I had promised to give it to her. But it was harder than I had expected. I was used to being the one who could smooth over conflicts, who could take the pain away. But this was different. The pain between Emily and me wasn't something that could be easily erased or forgotten. It was a crack in our foundation that could only be mended with time, and that time, it seemed, was something we both had to find on our own. Olivia, blissfully unaware of the emotional storms swirling beneath the surface, remained the one bright spot in my life. She was excited about her house, about starting a new chapter in her life, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of envy. Her world seemed so simple, so full of hope and possibility. She was looking forward while I felt like I was stuck in the past, trying to untangle the mess I had made. It was clear that Olivia could sense the shift in the air. She had asked me once casually, "Mom, what's going on with you and Emily?" Her voice had been filled with concern, but she hadn't pressed for more details. She didn't know how to understand it. How could she? She was still caught up in her own excitement and was eager to move forward with her life. But she didn't realize that I was still grappling with the emotional fallout from years of unspoken resentment and neglect. She didn't understand that despite my attempts to give her everything, I was slowly losing the woman who had been a part of our family for years. I wanted to tell Olivia everything. I wanted to explain to her how much I regretted not seeing Emily's pain sooner, how I had tried so hard to do the right thing for her, and yet still had missed the signs that something was wrong. But I didn't. I couldn't. It wasn't that I didn't trust her, but I knew this wasn't something I could unload onto her. Olivia had her own struggles, her own hopes, and I didn't want to burden her with the complexities of our family's issues. So I kept it inside, trying to reconcile my feelings on my own, while keeping up the facade of everything being fine. It wasn't fine, though. I knew that, and Emily knew it too. We hadn't spoken much in the days following our emotional conversation, but I could feel the distance between us. I couldn't push her to open up before she was ready. I had learned that much. But the waiting, the uncertainty was killing me. I wasn't sure how much longer I could go on like this, wondering if things would ever get better, or if they were beyond repair. One evening, as I sat in the quiet of the living room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between Emily and me. There was an unease in the air, a quiet tension that I could feel in the pit of my stomach. It was the kind of tension that you can't name, but you know is there, like a storm brewing on the horizon. Emily had been more withdrawn than ever. She would come to family dinners, but she rarely spoke. Her eyes avoided mine, and every time I reached out to her, she seemed to retreat further. I was torn between giving her the space she had asked for and desperately wanting to reach across the gap that had formed between us. But every time I took a step forward, I was met with resistance. I didn't know how to fix this. I didn't know how to fix her. And worse, I didn't know how to fix us. The guilt I felt weighed heavily on my chest. It was a constant reminder of my failure to see Emily, to truly understand her struggles. I thought I was doing everything right. I thought I was being a good mother, a good mother-in-law. But now, with everything out in the open, I saw how blind I had been, how selfish I had been. I had focused on Olivia's needs, her future, without realizing that Emily was quietly falling apart. But as much as I wanted to reach out and apologize again, I knew that wasn't enough. Words were no longer enough. Emily had been hurt for too long, and I had to prove to her that I could be there for her, not just when it was convenient, not just when I felt like it, but always. And yet, every time I tried to make a move, I was met with hesitation. What if it was too late? What if Emily couldn't forgive me? What if the damage I had done was beyond repair? I didn't know the answer to that. I didn't know if there was a way back. But I did know one thing: I couldn't give up. Not now. Not when there was still a chance to make things right. So I waited. And I hoped. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time I understood that healing wouldn't happen on my timeline. It would happen on Emily's. The aftermath of everything was harder than I imagined. Emily and I were still at odds, though the tension was quieter now, more subtle. Our conversations had become awkward, filled with things left unsaid. Emily remained distant, and I wasn't sure how to reach her anymore. I thought that after we spoke we'd begin to heal, but instead, it felt like the gulf between us only grew wider. Olivia, oblivious to the emotional storm between Emily and me, was still excited about her new house. I was happy for her, but every time she talked about her new life, I felt the weight of my failure. I hadn't realized until now how deeply my actions had hurt Emily. She had felt overlooked, unnoticed, like she was constantly competing for my attention. I wanted to fix it, but the more I tried, the more Emily withdrew. Every time I reached out, she stepped back. It wasn't out of anger anymore, she was simply closed off, guarding herself from further hurt. She wasn't ready to forgive me, and, no matter how many times I apologized, I could see that the wounds I'd caused ran too deep. Even Matt, Emily's husband, noticed the strain. I could see it in his eyes, the way he looked at Emily with concern, but also helplessness. He didn't know how to fix things either. I could tell he was trying to keep the peace, but he wasn't getting through to Emily, just like me. Despite my best efforts, Emily remained silent, emotionally distant. I couldn't figure out how to make it better. She had always been strong, never asking for anything, and now that I understood the depth of her pain, I wondered if I had been too late. Could I ever truly undo the hurt I'd caused? The guilt gnawed at me. I had been so focused on Olivia, thinking I was fixing her life, that I had failed to notice Emily's quiet struggle. The more I thought about it, the more I realized the extent of my mistake. I had let Emily slip through the cracks, and now she was paying the price for my neglect. There were moments, brief and fleeting, when I thought I saw a crack in Emily's emotional walls, a softening of her gaze, a small hint of understanding. But those moments always passed too quickly. It felt like we were on the edge of something, but I couldn't tell if it was progress or just a mirage. The hardest part was knowing that I couldn't force Emily to heal. I had to give her the space she had asked for, but that space felt like abandonment. How could I let her go through this alone when I knew I was the cause of her pain? I knew I couldn't fix everything overnight. And perhaps I wasn't meant to. All I could do was show up, be present, and let Emily know that I was here, ready to support her whenever she was ready to talk. But even that felt like I was asking for too much too soon. I wasn't sure how much longer I could go on like this, unsure of where we stood. But what I did know was that I couldn't give up. I couldn't stop trying. I had failed Emily, yes, but I had to believe that there was still a chance for us. It wasn't going to be easy. It might take years to rebuild what had been broken, but I wasn't ready to walk away. Not yet. I thought I had come to terms with the fallout of everything. Emily and I were still in limbo, our relationship hanging by a thread. The space between us was becoming the new normal. She remained distant, not outwardly hostile, but emotionally closed off, as though she had built a fortress around herself and wasn't ready to let anyone in. I had given her space just as I promised, but with every passing day, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were drifting further apart. The guilt I carried weighed on me. Each interaction with Emily seemed like a reminder of how much I had failed her. I knew that I couldn't just sit back and let this continue indefinitely, but I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to rebuild the bridge I had burned. One afternoon, while I was tidying up around the house, something caught my eye. A folder was lying on the kitchen counter, its contents spilling slightly out of the edges. I knew instantly that it didn't belong there. Curiosity got the best of me, and I picked it up. As I opened the folder, I found a series of letters, handwritten, personal, and clearly old. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized the familiar handwriting. It was Emily's. The letters were dated from several years ago, long before our recent confrontation, but as I read through them, my breath hitched. The words on the pages spoke of something deeper than I could have ever imagined. Emily had been writing to herself, pouring out her frustrations, her pain, and her confusion. But what struck me the hardest was the rawness of her emotions. In one of the letters, she wrote, "I don't feel like I belong here. I try, but I always feel like I'm not enough. No matter how much I give, no matter how much I try, I'm always second place behind Olivia, behind everyone else." My heart twisted in my chest. I hadn't known. I hadn't known how deeply Emily felt invisible in our family. I had seen her as the strong, capable one, the one who never needed anything, the one who took care of herself. But I was wrong. All these years I had been blind to the quiet suffering she endured. The hurt she had been hiding behind her stoic demeanor was now laid bare on those pages. As I read through the letters, I felt the weight of each word she had written. I'm afraid that if I keep feeling this way, I'll lose everything. I'll lose Matt. I'll lose Grace. I'll lose myself. I couldn't breathe. This was the woman I had married into the family, the woman I thought I knew, and yet I had never truly understood her. The more I read, the more I realized that the issues between Emily and me were far more complex than I had ever acknowledged. It wasn't just about the house. It wasn't just about Olivia. It was about the emotional distance that had always been there, the feeling that no matter what Emily did, it would never be enough. She had been trying to prove her worth to me, to Matt, to the whole family, and all this time, I had missed it. I quickly folded the letters back into the folder and placed it back where I had found it. My mind was spinning. I didn't know what to do with this new revelation. I wasn't sure if Emily would want me to have seen these letters, but now that I had, I couldn't ignore the depth of her pain. I felt a wave of guilt crash over me. I had thought that by offering Olivia everything, by trying to make up for lost time, I had been doing the right thing. But in doing so, I had overlooked the woman who had silently stood by my side for so long. I had failed to see how much Emily had been hurting, how much she had been fighting to feel like she mattered. It was clear now that the hurt between us went deeper than I had ever realized. It wasn't just about the house. It was about years of feeling neglected, of fighting for attention that never came, of silently carrying a burden she had never asked for. But the hardest part was understanding that I had been the cause of much of that pain. Emily had tried to tell me through subtle gestures, through quiet moments of withdrawal, but I hadn't listened. I had missed the signs. And now, after everything, it felt like it was too late to make it right. I couldn't fix everything in one moment, but I could try. And I had to. I had to let Emily know that I saw her, that I understood her now. I had to prove to her that I wasn't going to let her slip away, not without trying to repair the damage I had done. I couldn't shake the discovery of Emily's letters. The words she had written echoed in my mind, each one a painful reminder of how deeply I had failed to see her. She had been crying out for my attention, my understanding for years, and I had ignored it. I had focused so much on my own guilt with Olivia, on trying to make up for lost time, that I had failed to realize that Emily too needed me. The letters weren't just a confession of her pain, they were a plea for help, a cry for validation, for love, for acknowledgement. And I had missed it all. Every page I read made my heart ache deeper. How had I not seen the cracks in her armor? How had I allowed her to suffer in silence while I was so focused on fixing things for Olivia? I couldn't undo the years of hurt that Emily had endured, but I could try to show her that I was here now, that I finally understood the depth of her struggle. But the question remained, would she let me in? Would she ever trust me again? And would it be enough to rebuild the foundation of our relationship? Or had the damage been done beyond repair? I spent the next few days reflecting on everything, on the family, on the choices I had made, and on what I needed to do to fix what I had broken. I knew I couldn't force Emily to forgive me, but I could show her through my actions that I was willing to make the effort. She had asked for time and space, but I couldn't wait forever. I had to take responsibility for my role in her pain, and I had to show her that I wasn't going to give up on us. It was a difficult conversation to initiate, but I knew it was the only way forward. One evening after dinner, I asked Emily if she would talk with me. She hesitated at first, but eventually agreed. We sat down in the living room, the silence between us heavier than I remembered, as if everything that had been left unsaid hung in the air like a storm cloud. I've been thinking, I began, my voice quiet but steady, about everything. about how I've failed you, about how much you've been hurting and how much I missed. I want you to know that I see you now, Emily. I see your pain. I see how much you've been carrying, and I am so sorry. Emily didn't say anything at first. She looked at me, her expression guarded but not cold. I could see that she was processing what I had said, weighing it against everything that had happened between us. She wasn't ready to forgive, I knew that much. But there was something in her eyes that made me think there was still a chance. I've been holding on to this anger for so long, she finally said, her voice quiet but firm. And I've been so afraid. Afraid that if I let go of it, I'd lose myself. I've been so angry at you for so long, Grace. For not seeing me. For always making me feel like I wasn't enough. I swallowed the weight of her words, settling heavy in my chest. I never wanted to make you feel like that, I whispered. I never meant to make you feel like you weren't enough. But I can see now that I've hurt you more than I could ever have imagined. I wasn't there for you, Emily. I was too focused on trying to fix things with Olivia that I missed the signs that I missed you. She looked down, and for a moment the room was silent again. I didn't push her to speak. I just sat there waiting for her to process, knowing that I couldn't rush her healing. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, Emily said, her voice thick with emotion. But I'm trying. I want to try. But it's going to take time. My heart sank, but at the same time a glimmer of hope stirred within me. She wasn't shutting me out. She wasn't ready to forgive, but she was willing to try. And that was something. It wasn't the resolution I had hoped for, but it was a step forward. I'll be here, Emily, I said softly. For as long as it takes. I'm not going anywhere. She nodded, her eyes filled with unshed tears. I knew she wasn't just crying because of the pain she had endured. She was crying because for the first time in a long while there was a chance for healing. There was a chance for us to start again. But even as I said those words, I knew the road to redemption wasn't going to be easy. We both had a long way to go. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like the weight on my chest had begun to lift, if only slightly. I had apologized. I had owned up to my mistakes. And now all I could do was show up, be there for Emily, and give her the time she needed to heal. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't fixed. But it was a beginning. And that was enough for now. The road to healing was long and uncertain. I knew that nothing would be the same again. The damage had been done, the cracks in our relationship too deep to ignore. But as I sat there with Emily, I realized that we had taken the first step toward rebuilding. The weight of the silence had shifted, and while we weren't where we needed to be, I could see a glimmer of hope flickering between us. That was something. Something I hadn't expected to see when everything felt like it was falling apart. Emily and I didn't talk much after that evening. There were still moments when the tension was palpable, when the distance between us seemed insurmountable. But there were also small shifts, small, almost imperceptible signs that we were starting to heal little by little. She would linger a bit longer during family meals, no longer rushing off the second the plates were cleared. When I spoke to her, she looked at me differently, still guarded but not as cold as before. It was slow progress, but it was progress. I spent my days caught in the quiet of it all. I'd sit with my thoughts, replaying the conversations we'd had, wondering what more I could have done, what more I could do. I felt like I was walking a tightrope, terrified that one wrong move would send everything crashing down again. But as the days went on, I came to accept that there was no quick fix, no magic words that would make everything right. This was a process, one that would take time, and that was okay. I just had to be patient, something I wasn't always good at. Olivia, still blissfully unaware of the gravity of the situation, continued to thrive in her new home. I was happy for her, truly. She deserved every bit of joy this new chapter brought her, but I couldn't shake the pang of guilt every time she brought it up. She didn't understand the strain I was under. She didn't understand that I was slowly losing Emily in ways I wasn't sure I could fix. I wanted to share my struggles with Olivia, but I couldn't. She wasn't ready to understand the complexity of our family's emotions. She had her own life, her own excitement, and I didn't want to burden her with my pain. The thought of Emily's continued distance weighed on me more than I cared to admit, but I couldn't bring it up without risking making everything worse. So I continued to hold it in, silently wishing I could find a way to heal both sides of this rift. One evening, a week after Emily and I had talked, I decided to try something different. I asked her if she wanted to join me for a walk. It was a simple request, nothing monumental, but I hoped that maybe, just maybe, it could help us reconnect. The idea of spending time together without the pressure of conversation, just walking side by side, felt like a low-stakes way of trying to bridge the gap. To my surprise, Emily agreed. She was quiet as we walked, her eyes forward but not distant. We didn't talk much, just the occasional remark about the weather or the neighborhood. It wasn't anything deep, but it felt like the beginning of something. For the first time in a long while, I felt like we were sharing a space that was free of expectations, free of the tension that had been hanging between us for so long. As we neared the end of the walk, Emily spoke, her voice soft but steady. "I don't know how long it's going to take, Grace. To get back to where we were, I mean. I'm still angry. I'm still hurt." I nodded, understanding completely. "I know. And I'm not rushing you. I just want you to know that I'm here. Whenever you're ready." For a moment we walked in silence again, but this time it didn't feel as heavy. I didn't feel like I had to fill the space with words. I was simply present. And for the first time in weeks, it felt like Emily wasn't so far away. "Thanks," she said after a moment. "I don't know what the future holds, but I think I'm starting to believe that we can work through this. Eventually." I felt a warmth spread through me. It wasn't a promise of resolution, but it was a start. A small, fragile seed of hope planted in the middle of our fractured relationship. I had been so afraid that it was too late, that Emily's hurt had run too deep. But hearing her say those words was a quiet reminder that all wasn't lost. We didn't need to fix everything right now. We didn't need to be perfect. We just needed to take it one step at a time together. And in that moment, walking beside Emily, I realized that the hardest part wasn't the distance between us. The hardest part was simply waiting, knowing that time would do its work, and trusting that we would find our way back to each other eventually. Time was something I had never been good at waiting for. It moved too slowly when I wanted answers, too quickly when I was caught in the grip of something painful. And now, in the quiet aftermath of everything that had happened with Emily, I was acutely aware of how much time I needed to repair the damage I had done. But time was also something I had no control over. I couldn't rush Emily's healing, and I couldn't rush my own. All I could do was show up, be present, and let the process unfold on its own. In the days after our walk, I continued to give Emily the space she had asked for. I was careful not to push, careful not to expect too much. The hardest part was not knowing where we stood. I wasn't sure if she was truly ready to forgive me, or if she was simply trying to be civil. But the truth was, I didn't need her to forgive me immediately. I needed her to feel safe again, to feel like she could trust me with her pain. That was something I could work toward one day at a time. Olivia, meanwhile, had noticed the subtle shift in the atmosphere. She didn't know everything, of course, but she had always been perceptive. I could see the questions in her eyes, the concern when she asked how things were going with Emily. She wanted to know if things were getting better, if I was okay. But I wasn't sure how to answer her without burdening her. She was caught up in her own world, her excitement about her new house, and the future she was building, and I didn't want to pull her into the complicated mess of my relationship with Emily. The guilt I had been carrying for months still lingered, but there were moments when I felt a slight easing of the weight. Emily wasn't as distant as she had been, though she wasn't exactly warm either. I saw the flickers of something different in her moments when she would let her guard down just a little before retreating again. But I didn't mind the back and forth. I had learned painfully that healing couldn't be rushed. There would be good days and bad days. I had to accept that just as I had to accept that I couldn't fix everything with a single conversation or gesture. In the evenings when the house was quiet and I sat alone with my thoughts, I often wondered if it was enough. Was showing up enough? Was giving Emily the space she needed the right thing to do? I wanted to make it better. Wanted to make her feel better, wanted to undo the years of neglect I had never intended to cause. But I knew now that I couldn't do it alone. I couldn't fix what was broken with just my own efforts. I had to let Emily take the lead on her own time, and that meant letting go of my desperate need for resolution. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, Emily sat down across from me. Her eyes met mine, guarded but softer than before. It had been a few days since our walk, and I wasn't sure what to expect. I didn't want to read too much into her actions, but a small part of me had hoped that maybe, just maybe, things were starting to shift. I've been thinking, she began, her voice tentative, about everything, about what you said. And I want you to know, I'm trying. I'm not sure when things will go back to normal or if they ever will, but I'm trying to let go of the anger. I felt a tightness in my chest as she spoke. It wasn't the full forgiveness I had hoped for, but it was something. A glimmer of movement, a shift in the right direction. I'm not asking for things to go back to how they were, I said quietly, feeling the weight of the moment. I don't want to rush this. I just want you to know that I'm here for you. And I'm sorry. I'm really sorry for not seeing you, for not giving you the attention you deserved. She nodded, her eyes softening for a moment. I know. I know you're sorry. And I'm trying to believe that you're here for me. I'm trying to trust that. The words weren't perfect, but they were the first real steps forward we had taken in months. It wasn't a quick fix, and it wasn't a promise of immediate reconciliation, but it was progress. And in the fragile space between us, that was all I could ask for. I didn't know what the future held for us. I didn't know if Emily and I would ever fully heal, or if the scar of the past would always linger between us. But I did know that we were moving in the right direction. Slowly, cautiously, but together. As I looked at Emily, a small part of me allowed myself to hope. Hope that the road to redemption wouldn't be as impossible as it once seemed. Hope that time, though slow, would be the thing that healed us both. I couldn't change the past, but I could be here now. And maybe that would be enough to begin again. I had never realized how much weight the past could carry until I tried to lay it down. The years of neglect, the guilt, the silent battles between Emily and me, they had all added up, each moment stacking upon the last, creating a burden I had carried for so long without fully understanding it. But as I sat there across from Emily, I felt the burden start to lighten just slightly, as if we were finally starting to let go of the things that had held us in place. Our relationship had been fractured, yes, but it wasn't shattered. It wasn't beyond repair. The cracks were still there, but we had started to fill them slowly, carefully, with time and patience. It wasn't an instant fix, but nothing in life ever truly was. And as I looked at Emily now, I could see something different in her eyes, a softness, a flicker of understanding that had been absent before. I'm not sure what's next, I said quietly, my voice tinged with both uncertainty and hope. I don't know where we go from here, but I want you to know that I'm here, for as long as it takes. She nodded, her gaze steady. There was no immediate smile, no sudden burst of warmth. But there didn't need to be. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was a shared understanding that things would take time. And that was okay. I know, Emily replied, her voice calm but full of emotion. I'm not asking for everything to be fixed right away, but I think I'm ready to try. And that's more than I could have said before. We didn't need to speak more than that. We both knew what was at stake, and we both knew how much work would be required. But that small admission of being ready to try felt like the first real step toward rebuilding what we had lost. Olivia, still unaware of the full extent of the changes between Emily and me, continued to move forward with her new life. She was still consumed with the excitement of her new home, and I couldn't blame her. She was starting a new chapter one that didn't involve the emotional turmoil that Emily and I had been facing. But I knew deep down that Olivia too would eventually see the shift. She would notice the changes in me and Emily and in the family dynamic. And when that time came, I hoped I would be ready to explain to show her that healing wasn't always a straight line, that sometimes it took more than just a few words to fix what had been broken. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself learning a new way of being present, no longer as a fixer, no longer as someone who believed that love alone could heal all wounds. No healing was more complicated than that. It was about showing up every day even when things weren't easy. It was about understanding that the process was messy, that it took time, and that the road wasn't always clear. Frank had been my constant, my support through it all. He never asked questions when I needed to cry, never told me to move on or get over it. He simply let me be. And I knew that his quiet presence was the foundation that had kept me grounded through this journey. Emily, too, had been patient with me. There were days when I thought we were slipping back into the same patterns, but then there were other days when I could see the spark of the woman I had known, someone strong, someone capable of love and trust. I knew we weren't there yet, but I wasn't afraid of that anymore. I was ready to take things at her pace, to let time do its work, and to trust that one day the foundation we were building would be strong enough to withstand whatever came next. I had learned so much through this painful journey. I had learned that love wasn't enough to fix everything, but it was a start. I had learned that family was complicated, messy, and sometimes broken beyond recognition. But I had also learned that healing was possible. Even after all the hurt, even after the silence, there was always room for a new beginning. I didn't know what the future held for me or for Emily, but I knew that for the first time in a long while, I had hope. I had hope that we would find our way back to each other, not to the way things were, but to something better, something stronger. A bond rebuilt from the ashes of our past. As I looked at Emily, I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't seen before, not just pain, but the quiet possibility of forgiveness. And for now, that was enough. We weren't fixed. We weren't perfect. But we were trying. And that was all that mattered.